They say you can tell the strength of a nation by the storms it has survived. If that's true, then Iran is made of iron and flame. This isn't a country that simply exists on a map. It's a civilization that has endured time itself. Long before the West was even born, Iran was already writing poetry, building empires, and shaping the destiny of entire regions. And yet, for all its beauty, Iran has always lived with one hand on the sword and the other raised in prayer. Because survival in this part of the world has never come easy. But Iran never asked for ease. It asked for endurance. The West often sees resistance as rebellion, but for Iran, resistance is remembrance. It's remembering the soul of a people who once stood at the center of human civilization, and who refused to be erased or reduced to a shadow of someone else's idea of progress. The Persian Empire didn't just conquer, it created roads, laws, art, language. And even after its fall, the spirit of that empire lived on. In the poets, in the scholars, in the farmers who passed down pride with every breath. When foreign boots trampled Iranian soil, the people didn't forget. When their oil was exploited, when their leaders were removed like pawns in a global game, they didn't forget. That memory became muscle, and that muscle became a warning. Asterisk, we may bend, but we will not break. Asterisk, through invasions, coups, sanctions, and threats, Iran became fluent in the language of endurance. And it learned how to speak that language not with bitterness, but with clarity. What many outside don't understand is that Iran's resistance isn't rooted in hatred, it's rooted in history. A history that taught them empires fall, that taught them loyalty to foreign powers brings only betrayal, that taught them to build something that cannot be bought, bombed, or manipulated. Asterisk, asterisk, identity, asterisk, asterisk. And once a people know who they are, there is no amount of propaganda, pressure, or persuasion that can make them forget it. That's why every attempt to destabilize Iran only awakens something deeper within it. It's not pride, it's memory. It's the memory of Darius and Cyrus, of Hafez and Rumi. It's the echo of prayers whispered under tyranny, the stories told in whispers during war. It's a fire that refuses to go out because it knows it carries the legacy of survival and the responsibility of the generations yet to come. You don't erase a people like that. You can surround them, starve them, isolate them, but you can't destroy them. Because they remember, and what they remember gives them power. Iran didn't choose to be unbreakable. It was forced to become that way. When the world turns its back on you, when the walls close in and the voices around you try to define your worth, there's only one place left to turn asterisk asterisk inward asterisk asterisk. And for Iran, that inward turn has always led upward, toward God, toward faith, toward a source of strength that no sanction, no soldier, and no superpower could ever dismantle. Faith, for many, is just tradition. For Iran, it's transformation. It is not simply a set of rituals. It is a source of resilience. It's the invisible shield that wraps around the soul of the nation. It doesn't ask for applause or validation. It endures in silence, in prayer, in the early morning calls to worship when the world is still asleep. It's in those sacred moments that Iran draws its truest strength, not from might, but from meaning. You see, while the West invests in weapons, Iran invests in the will. And that will is forged through centuries of belief that suffering has a purpose, that justice will prevail, and that even the smallest act of resistance is seen and recorded by a higher power. That kind of faith turns struggle into sacrifice and pain into purpose. It creates a kind of warrior who doesn't fight just to survive, but to serve something eternal. Iran's enemies have never fully understood this. They've tried to crush the country's economy, isolate its leaders, and distort its image. But no external pressure can compare to the inner peace of a person who knows who they are in the eyes of God. That's where the West miscalculates. It mistakes simplicity for weakness. But what looks like submission to some is actually surrender to something greater than any earthly power. You can't measure the power of that kind of belief with statistics or military reports. It shows up in the mother who teaches her child to trust in divine timing even when the shelves are empty. It shows up in the man who bows in prayer while drones fly overhead. It shows up in the youth who study science and theology side by side, believing that knowledge and faith walk together, not apart. And while others chase control, Iran chooses conviction. That conviction isn't always loud. It's not always understood, but it's always present. It lives in the rhythm of daily prayer, in the honoring of martyrs, in the sacredness of community. It holds people together when everything else threatens to tear them apart. Because when your backbone is faith, your foundation is unshakable. And when your fortress is built on belief, the enemy may reach your borders, but they'll never touch your soul. There's a certain arrogance that comes with power, the belief that you can break the will of a people by choking their economy, limiting their options, and isolating them from the world. But what the world has learned, time and again, is that true strength doesn't grow in comfort. It's born in resistance. And in Iran's case, sanctions didn't lead to surrender. They led to something far more dangerous to those who imposed them: self-reliance. The sanctions were meant to be a cage, cut off trade, restrict access to medicine, freeze assets. The assumption was simple: starve the body, and the soul will follow. But what they didn't expect was that Iran would turn that cage into a crucible. That, instead of folding under the pressure, the country would find new ways to survive. And not just survive, but adapt, evolve, and innovate. You don't walk through decades of economic warfare without scars, but you also don't walk through it without learning. Iran learned to make what it could no longer import. It built industries with its own hands, trained its own scientists, cultivated a generation that grew up knowing how to work with less and dream with more. The lesson: necessity isn't just the mother of invention. It's the midwife of independence. And while the West thought it was cutting off Iran's air supply, what it really did was force the country to breathe deeper on its own. Dependency gave way to determination. Black markets became innovation hubs. Shortages inspired creativity. And all the while, something quiet but powerful was forming beneath the surface: dignity. See, there's something profoundly dignified about a nation that refuses to beg, about a people who won't trade their sovereignty for convenience. Iran could have bent, could have compromised its identity just to fit into the mold of global acceptance. But instead, it chose the harder path, the path of endurance, of self-sacrifice, of building from within, even when the world seemed determined to tear it apart from the outside. And that decision didn't just strengthen its economy in new ways. It strengthened the spirit of its people. Because when you've had to grow your own medicine, when you've had to design your own defense systems, when you've had to teach your children why resilience matters more than riches, you don't forget that. You pass it down. You wear it like armor. So no, sanctions didn't destroy Iran. They revealed it. They stripped away the illusions and left behind something raw, something real. A nation that doesn't just know how to endure adversity, but how to turn adversity into power. What was meant to weaken the body only awakened the will. War isn't always fought with bullets and bombs. Sometimes it's fought in silence, in headlines, in movies, in the subtle, constant drip of misinformation designed to chip away at how a nation sees itself. The West has long mastered this form of conflict psychological warfare. It doesn't destroy cities, it destroys confidence. It doesn't bomb homes, it infiltrates minds. And yet, in all this, Iran remains a place that refuses to be mentally colonized. Because this war isn't just about land or resources. It's about narrative, it's about identity. It's about who gets to define right and wrong, who gets to call someone a threat, and who gets to stand tall in their own story. The West crafts its image of Iran through fear, through distortion, through a carefully curated lens that never shows the full picture. And why? Because if the full picture were seen, one of culture, strength, unity, and intellect, then the world might start asking different questions. But Iran knows this, and Iran pushes back, not just with words, but with awareness. The people see through the manipulation. They've been watching the game long enough to understand its rules. Propaganda may be loud, but truth sits quietly and patiently because it doesn't need to shout. And truth is what Iran carries, not in its hands, but in its memory. The psychological warfare waged against Iran has always tried to paint it as unstable, irrational, dangerous. But look closer. Who has endured the most instability and still found ways to educate, innovate, and lead? Who has been cornered, isolated, misrepresented, and still refuses to hate itself? That kind of resolve isn't born from political strategy. It's born from generational awareness, from a deep understanding that your value does not depend on someone else's approval. You see, the greatest defense against psychological warfare is not just resistance, it's identity. When a people know who they are, they become immune to manipulation. And the Iranian people know exactly who they are. They are the inheritors of an ancient soul, a civilization that stood tall when others were still crawling. That memory, the memory of greatness, of perseverance, of divine connection, acts like armor for the mind. This is why fear doesn't work here. This is why intimidation falls flat. Because the West is trying to plant doubt in a land where roots run too deep. Roots that have felt every quake, every drought, every invasion, and still hold firm. And maybe that's what frustrates the world most. That a nation so fiercely misrepresented continues to rise in dignity, in thought, and in purpose. That no matter how loudly the world speaks against it, Iran continues to speak to its people with clarity, conviction, and pride. You can try to conquer the body, but when the mind is free, you've already lost. Unity is a rare thing in this world, especially under pressure. Most nations fracture when faced with fire. They turn inward, divide, blame, scatter. But Iran does the opposite. Under fire, it unites. It doesn't just survive hardship. It becomes stronger through it. That strength isn't just found in its soldiers or its leaders. It's found in its people. From the martyrs to the masses, every layer of Iranian society shares a silent vow. We may suffer, but we do not separate. The world often misunderstands this unity. It sees public mourning, mass funerals, and organized resistance as signs of indoctrination or control. But look closer. Look at the tears of a mother burying her son and still saying, he died for something greater than himself. Look at the crowds that gather not in fear, but in faith. This isn't performance, it's purpose. This isn't pressure, it's pride. When General Qasem Soleimani was killed, the West expected fear, expected collapse, but what they saw instead was millions of people flooding the streets. Men, women, young, old. all walking as one. Not because they were told to, but because they felt something deeper, something rooted in history, in sacrifice, in shared pain. That's what martyrdom means in Iran. It's not the end of a life. It's the extension of a legacy, a signal to the next generation that we still stand . This unity doesn't only surface in grand gestures. It lives in the ordinary, too, in neighbors sharing food when shelves are empty, in young students organizing relief when disaster strikes, in strangers standing side by side in prayer, shoulder to shoulder, heartbeat to heartbeat. That's not just survival. That's strength that's been tested and proven, over and over again, and maybe that's the part the world doesn't fully understand, because it can't be measured. Unity doesn't show up on economic charts or satellite images, but it's there in every chant, in every quiet act of resistance, in every heart that beats for something bigger than itself. It's why attempts to divide Iran from within always fail, because this nation doesn't just mourn together, it moves forward together. Even in loss, there's loyalty. Even in grief, there's growth. Every time a martyr falls, 10 more rise in his place. Not because they want to die, but because they want to live for something sacred, something enduring. And that's where Iran finds its power, not in avoiding fire, but in walking through it side by side. You can shake the earth beneath a people, but when they lock arms in the storm, they become immovable. The world is changing. You can feel it. The old order, the one built on domination, manipulation, and selective morality, it's beginning to crack. For decades, power was defined by who controlled the narrative, who had the loudest voice, the biggest army, the strongest currency. But that definition is no longer holding. Nations once silenced are now speaking. Those once pushed to the margins are now becoming the center of conversation. And in the midst of this shift, Iran is not just surviving, it is standing tall. Iran never waited for permission to matter. It never asked for validation from global powers. It knew deep within its bones that dignity doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from being true. And that truth has guided its steps through war, sanctions, isolation, and distortion. While others scrambled to chase influence, Iran focused on cultivating identity. And now, in this moment of global uncertainty, that focus is paying off. You see, power is changing hands not through conquest, but through clarity. More and more nations are recognizing that sovereignty is non-negotiable, that dignity can't be bought or brokered. Iran understood this long before it became a global trend. And now, instead of bending to fit into someone else's system, it's becoming a symbol of how to build a different one. This new world order doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to those who have learned how to listen, to their people, to their history, to their calling. Iran listened, it learned. It resisted not just with weapons, but with wisdom, not just with defiance, but with discipline. And because of that, it stands today not just as a country, but as a statement, a reminder to every nation that being underestimated is not a curse, it's an opportunity. Others measure progress by profit. Iran measures it by principle. Others seek alliances built on convenience. Iran seeks alignment built on conviction. That's why it continues to forge bonds with nations who share its values, nations who have also been pushed, pressured, and provoked, but never broken. Together, they are shaping something new, a world less dominated by force and more defined by fairness. This isn't about Iran becoming a superpower. It's about Iran becoming a moral compass in a time when the world desperately needs one. A nation that says, we will not trade our soul for a seat at your table. That kind of stance doesn't always bring applause, but it brings respect. The kind of respect that doesn't need permission, the kind that lasts. Because when the world finally begins to shift, it's not the tallest towers that remain, it's the deep